The phone screen glowed, a small rectangle of curated perfection in the dim room. Sam's thumb moved on its own, a tired flick upward. Another vacation photo, another promotion announcement, another person who seemed to have it all figured out. The familiar tightness started in his chest, a low hum of not enough. It wasn't envy, not exactly. It was the heavy, dull weight of measuring his entire life against these highlight reels. The window to everyone else's world was always open, and the draft it let in was always cold. The internal clutter was deafening, a storm of should best and why not you. He knew there had to be a different way, a single, small thing to close that window and find quiet again. The email arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. It was a polite rejection for a project he'd poured his heart into. The words, "We've decided to move in another direction," seemed to burn on the screen. The familiar hum in his chest erupted into a roar. This was the proof, the undeniable evidence that he was falling behind. That night, he tried to solve it the only way he knew how, by trying harder. He opened his laptop, determined to work longer to outrun the feeling. But the noise only grew louder. Every article he read felt like another person achieving what he could not. Every successful post was a reminder of his own stalled progress. He was adding fuel to the very storm he was trying to escape. Sitting there at 2 a.m., exhausted and defeated, the realization finally broke through the noise. The problem wasn't the missed opportunity. The problem was the constant measuring. He was trying to fix his life by staring at everyone else's. The gap he felt wasn't about achievement, it was about the exhausting act of comparison itself. He looked at his phone, the source of so much of the static. With a conscious effort that felt strangely significant, he pressed the button and swiped the social media app closed. He didn't feel peace. Not yet. But for the first time all day, he felt a sliver of space. The noise was still there, but it was now on the other side of a door he had just chosen to shut. The next morning, the urge to open the app was a physical pull. His hand reached for the phone out of habit. But he remembered the small space from the night before. Instead of opening it, he placed the phone face down on the table. This was the boundary. It wasn't about ignoring other people's joy or success. It was about protecting the fragile path of his own. The window to their world didn't need to be open all the time. He felt the old anxiety begin to rise, the tightness returning. This was the moment. He closed his eyes. He breathed in slowly, counting to 4. He held the breath for a count of 2. Then, he breathed out for a count of 6. He gave his breath a job. The air felt cool coming in, and as he exhaled, it was as if he was releasing a small amount of the hot, heavy pressure in his chest. He did it again. In for 4, hold for 2, out for 6. The thoughts were still there. You should be further along. Look what they've accomplished. But now, he noticed them without grabbing onto them. It was a small victory, just the noticing. He imagined the thoughts as birds flying past a window. He didn't have to open the window and let them in. He could just watch them pass. He began to practice a simple question whenever he felt the pull to compare. Is this my business? Is their vacation my business? Is their promotion my business? The answer was almost always a quiet no. My business is my breath. My business is this small step right in front of me. Little by little, the internal load began to lighten. It wasn't a dramatic shift, but a gradual lightening, like a fog slowly clearing. The practice wasn't about stopping thoughts. It was about changing his relationship with them. He stopped measuring his behind the scenes against everyone else's highlight reel. He shifted from measuring to simply being where he was. On a walk, he noticed the feel of the sun instead of thinking about who else might be on a better walk somewhere else. While working, he focused on the task itself, not on how the finished product would stack up against someone else's. He realized that true progress wasn't born in the frantic energy of comparison. It happened in the quiet spaces he was creating. In the space between the urge to check and the conscious choice to breathe. In the space between seeing someone else's success and making it a story about his own failure. That space, once cluttered with noise, was now where his own power could begin to grow. The practice was the steady work of guarding that space, of keeping the window closed long enough for his own garden to get some sun. Days turned into weeks, and the practice became his anchor. The small victory of a single resisted scroll or a single conscious breath began to accumulate. He stopped keeping score in a game he never agreed to play. His relationship with his own goals started to change. They were no longer frantic things to be chased in a race against invisible competitors. They became quiet things to be built, one small, steady piece at a time. He could sit with a difficult task and simply work on it, without the background noise screaming that he was already behind. The clarity that came from less internal noise was unexpected. He started to hear his own thoughts again, his own quiet wants that had been drowned out for so long. He realized he could genuinely feel happy for a friend's success without it triggering a spiral of self-doubt. Celebrating others no longer felt like diminishing himself. It was just a celebration. The question had permanently shifted. It was no longer, how do I measure up to them? The new question was simple and his alone to answer. Am I moving, even slowly, toward what actually matters to me? He looked back at the energy of his old life, that frantic, anxious striving. It was like trying to run on a treadmill while constantly looking at the person on the treadmill next to him. He was exhausting himself without getting anywhere. Now, his pace was slower, but it was steady. He was finally moving forward on his own path, and he could feel the ground beneath his feet. He understood that the only comparison that held any value at all was the gentle, honest look back at his past self. Not to judge, but to acknowledge the quiet progress made in the space he had fought to create. Sam looked at the project on his screen, finally complete. There was no roar of applause, no external validation. Just a quiet, deep satisfaction that was entirely his own. He hadn't beaten anyone. He had simply built something. The only thing he had needed was the willingness, moment by moment, to close the window on the world's noise and tend to his own garden. I encourage anyone feeling stuck in that cycle of comparison to give this small practice a try. You do not have to stop the thoughts. Just give your breath a job and protect your own space. The power to build the life you want doesn't come from looking sideways. It grows in the quiet you create when you choose to look inward, and then, steadily, forward.